Good Tuesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for June the 6th. Today, we're reading together in Deuteronomy chapter 32, which is known as the Song of Moses. Some refer to it as Yahweh's Song, and still some others would view this as Israel's national anthem. This was a song, as we read yesterday, was to be taught to the Israelites so that they could sing it together. It's not just a song as we might think of a song, which is something that just entertains. And this was a tool of teaching. It was something that they were to learn so they might be reminded of the truths that are found within it. So let's read about this song today and have a few comments about what is found here within it. Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse number 1. Deuteronomy 32, verse number 1. Pay attention, heavens, and I will speak. Actually, let me back up to 31 in chapter 31, verse number 30. Then Moses recited aloud every single word of this song to the entire assembly of Israel. Pay attention, heavens, and I will speak. Listen, earth, to the words from my mouth. Let my teaching fall like rain, and my word settle like dew, like gentle rain on new grass and showers on tender plants. For I will proclaim Yahweh's name, declare the greatness of our God. The rock, his work is perfect. All his ways are just, a faithful God without bias. He is righteous and true. His people have acted corruptly toward him. This is their defect. They are not his children, but a devious and crooked generation. Is this how you repay Yahweh, you foolish and senseless people? Isn't he your father and creator? Didn't he make you and sustain you? Remember the days of old. Consider the years of past generations. Ask your father, and he will tell you, your elders, and they will teach you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance and divided the human race, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the people of Israel, or there's a manuscript variant here, depending on what you're looking at, or it could read according to the numbers of the sons of God or according to the numbers of the angels. We'll talk about that more here in just a little bit. But Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob his own inheritance. He found him in a desolate land, in a barren, howling wilderness. He surrounded him, cared for him, and protected him as the pupil of his eye. He watches over his nest like an eagle and hovers over his young. He spreads his wings, catches him, and carries him on his feathers. Yahweh alone led him, with no help from a foreign god. He made him ride on the heights of the land and eat the produce of the field. He nourished him with honey from the rock and oil from the flinty rock, herds from the herd, and milk from the flock, with the fat of lambs, rams of Bashan, and goats with the choicest grains of wheat. You drank wine from the finest grapes. Then Jeshurun became fat and rebelled. You became fat, bloated, and gorged. He abandoned the God who made him and scorned the rock of his salvation. They provoked his jealousy with different gods. They enraged him with detestable practices. They sacrificed to demons, but not God, to gods they had not known, new gods that had just arrived, which your ancestors did not fear. You ignored the rock who gave you birth, and you forgot the God who gave birth to you. When Yahweh saw this, he despised them, angered by his sons and daughters. He said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what will become of them, for they are a perverse generation, unfaithful children. They have provoked my jealousy with what is not a God. They have enraged me with their worthless idols. So I will provoke their jealousy with what is not a people. I will enrage them with a foolish nation. For fire has been kindled because of my anger, and burns to the depths of Sheol, and devours the land and its produce, and scorches the foundations of the mountains. I will pile disasters on them. I will use my arrows against them. They will be weak from hunger, ravaged by pestilence and bitter plague. I will unleash on them wild beasts with fangs, as well as venomous snakes that slither in the dust. Outside the sword will take their children, and inside there will be terror. The young man with the young woman will be killed, the infant and the gray-haired man. I would have said, I will cut them to pieces and blot out the memory of them from mankind, if I had not feared provocation from the enemy, or feared that these foes might misunderstand and say, our own hand has prevailed. It wasn't Yahweh who did this. Israel is a nation lacking sense, with no understanding at all. If only they were wise, they would comprehend this. They would understand their fate. How could one pursue 1,000, or two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them, unless Yahweh had given them up? But their rock is not like our rock, as even our enemies concede, for their vine is from the vine of Sodom, and from the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are poisonous, their clusters are bitter. Their wine is serpent's venom and deadly poison, and the deadly poison of cobras. It is not stored up with me, sealed up in my vaults. Vengeance and retribution belong to me. In time their foot will slip, for their day of disaster is near, and their doom is coming quickly. Yahweh will indeed vindicate his people and have compassion on his servants when he sees that their strength is gone and no one is left slave or free. He will say, where are their gods? The rock they found refuge in, who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offerings. Let them rise up and help you. Let it be a shelter for you. See now, I alone am he. There is no God but me. I bring death and I give life. I wound and I heal. No one can rescue anyone from my power. I raise my hands to heaven and declare, as surely as I live forever, when I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold of judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, while my sword devours flesh, the blood of the slain and the captives, the heads of the enemy leaders. Rejoice, you nations, concerning his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will take vengeance on his adversaries. He will purify his land and his people. Moses came with Joshua, son of Nun, and recited all the words of this song in the presence of the people. After Moses finished reciting all these words to all Israel, he said to them, take to heart all these words I'm giving you as a warning today, so that you may command your children to follow all the words of this law carefully, for they are not meaningless words to you, but they are your life. And by them you will live long in the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess. On that same day, Yahweh spoke to Moses, go up Mount Nebo in the Abarim range in the land of Moab, across from Jericho, and view the land of Canaan I am giving the Israelites as a possession. Then you will die on the mountain that you go up, and you will be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. For both of you broke faith with me among the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, by failing to treat me as holy in their presence. Although from a distance you will view the land that I'm giving the Israelites, you will not go there. And that is Deuteronomy chapter 32. There's another pretty significant textual variant that we'll note from verse 43 here in just a moment. I didn't read it just because it's a fairly long variant. Nonetheless, as we look at this song, I liked what one writer says about this song. He says, in essence, songs like this, referring to Deuteronomy 32, were written to construct the past in such a way as to assist in forming a concrete social identity among the reading and listening audience, with the goal of creating commitment or obligation to a specific ideal, value, or belief, unquote. This is certainly this is certainly true of Deuteronomy 32. This song rehearses in lyric form the essence of Moses' preaching, appealing to every generation to acknowledge Yahweh's work of grace on their behalf, to reject all other spiritual allegiances, and to recognize the consequences of infidelity, and to rejoice in the hope that ultimately Yahweh's commitment to them is immutable. I think it's really well said, a good summary of this particular song. That is seen again as Moses. It's referred to as Moses' song because he's the one that is teaching it. He's leading it this first time. But this is the message of Yahweh, and it is going to be, in many senses, Israel's national anthem. And it begins by the call that they recognize the truths that are about to be shared. Again, there is legal language here that he calls heaven and earth to hear the words that he is about to say. And he implores them to recognize that these words are blessings to them, that these words, which are not just meaningless, as he says at the end, but they are teaching words. They are impactful words. They should be words that influence them to live a certain way. Recognize that God is good, that he is a faithful God. He is without bias. He is righteous. He is true. He is perfect. His ways are just. This is the God who is speaking to you through this song. This is the God who wants you to understand these important truths. Number one, the first truth that's mentioned right off the bat is that Israel's bad. They have acted corruptly towards him, and that is their defect. They are not his children, but they are a devious and crooked generation. And basically, to begin with, this is ridiculous. It is so absurd that this is the way you react to God, considering everything he has done for you. Is this how you repay Yahweh, you foolish and senseless people? God has done so many things for them, and that begins to be discussed in verse number 7, where basically Israel is cross-examined. We can almost read this text as in a courtroom setting. Again, there's legal language to begin the song, and it continues here where they are cross-examined to show God's love and to show his faithfulness towards Israel in the fact that he chose them out of all the nations. Again, that textual variant, the translation issue that pops up in verse number 8. I think what we see in verses in verse 8 is in reference to Genesis chapter 11, with the events that took place at Babel, where the human race of the time, the people gathered together to try to in some way force God's hand, to think that they could raise themselves up to God's level, but God humbles them through confusing the languages, and he disinherits the nations. He divorces himself from the nations. I think that's what is being described here, that when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance and divided the human race, that seems very clear to be talking about Babel. He set the boundaries of the people according to the number of the people of Israel. Now, that to me just does not make any sense, because Israel's not around at that point. That's just not there. But that translation is taken from the Masoretic text, which is the text that our Old Testaments, as we have them today, are based upon. But we have to recognize that there are other Old Testament manuscript families. There is the Septuagint version, which is where Hebrew was translated into Greek, and that's what Jesus, for the most part, quoted from. There's also the evidence of the Dead Sea Scrolls that are there for us to examine the Masoretic text and to compare with it. And in both of those translations, it doesn't talk about the sons of Israel, but instead it talks about supernatural beings, either referring to them as the sons of God or referring specifically to angels, according to the number of angels. To me, I understand that to make a lot more sense, because they're in that moment, and comparing it with what we see in verse number 9, it speaks about how God, again, pushes the nations away, because you turn the page to chapter 12 and we see him specifically embracing Israel, at that time being Abraham and Sarah. Now he chooses them as his special people, and then allows the nations to go. And in the worldview that I would understand from this is that you have these other spiritual beings that God operates with, that are under the direction of God, that he would say, hey, you take care of these nations. You will be my work between myself and them. But Israel, myself, that's my people. I'm going to directly intervene with them. I'm going to directly operate with them. I'm going to directly interact with them. These are my people. And Moses' point here is that of all the people on the earth, you are the one people that God chose to be intimately familiar with more than anybody else. All the other nations have been divided up and given to others, but you are God's special people. What a privileged position it is for them to have this, and to see how God provided for them in every single way. That's verses 10 through 11 talks about how God has shown such great love for them through all the ways in which he has provided for them. There's a number of different metaphors that are used here to describe God's care for Israel. Yet, verse 15, here is Israel's issue. Here is where they are accused and they are judged because they have rejected that. They became fat, they rebelled. This Jeshurun is a moniker for Israel. It's used in other places as well. Because God had blessed them so much, they became really arrogant. They began to forget God. And so they turned from him. They abandoned God. They scorned God. They provoked God. They did detestable things. They practiced sacrificing to demons. They ignored God. They forgot God. All these negative things they did caused God then, because he recognized that he was despised in their eyes, he goes and he judges them. He punishes them for their rebellion. How does he do that? Well, he punishes them by judging them with a people that is not his people. He actually used the nations that he disinherited as a tool to judge his people. He showed, in some senses, more favor towards the nations than he did his people by using the nations as the tool of punishment for his people. And the covenant curses then are going to come into play within this section, verses 19 through 25, that they are going to be punished because they were unfaithful to God. Now, beginning in verse 26 and going through verse 38, there is the perception here that God is challenged this earthly possession, or this earthly perception that God is challenging, because as he's punishing his people and as he's using the nations to do it, the nations themselves might think, well, look how great we are. We are going to have great victory over this nation that claims that their God is the one true God. And yet God says, no, I'm not going to allow you to get away with that. Again, you are just a tool. You were just a tool. I could have just destroyed my people, but I choose to show mercy. And one of the reasons he shows mercy is to not give the nations the opportunity to taunt him. Unfortunately, Israel, they are lacking in sense. And so God is going to allow these nations for a time, because of Israel's unfaithfulness, to have victory over them. How could, verse 30, how could one pursue 1,000 or two put 10,000 to flight unless their rock had sold them, unless Yahweh had given them up? That's what he's referring to here. It's not the gods of these nations that are empowering them to do these things. It's the fact that Yahweh, the one true God, is allowing this to happen. He's allowing this to happen. Therefore, any trust that anyone's putting in these gods, whether they be of the nations trusting their gods, or whether it be Israel, who has been showing faithfulness to these gods instead of the one true God, all of that is absolute foolishness. And in fact, God says, I'm going to punish the nations. And in punishing the nations, I'm going to show compassion to Israel. And I'm going to remind them, say, hey, where are those gods that you trusted in so much? Where are those gods that you sacrificed to? Why are they not helping you out? And of course, the reason for that is they have no true power. They have no power. See now that I, verse 39, I alone am he. There is no God but me. I bring death and I give life. I wound and I heal. No one can rescue anyone from my power. I raise my hands to heaven and declare, as surely as I live forever, when I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold of judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, while my sword devours flesh, the blood of the slain and the captives, the head of the enemy leaders. God saying, I am at work. No one can stand against me, whether it is my own people who have rejected me and I will punish them, or whether it be the nations who have gotten too big for their britches and I'm going to punish them as well. Everyone I'm going to bring under judgment. Verse 43 then finishes up. And again, the way the CSB translates this is, rejoice, you nations, concerning his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will take vengeance on his adversaries. He will purify his land and his people. But there are, again, whether it be the Septuagint or whether it be what's found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, a much longer reading. As far as the Septuagint goes, it says, rejoice, you heavens, along with him, and let all the sons of God worship him. Rejoice, you nations, with his people, and let all the angels of God strengthen themselves in him. That is added into, I think, just that first part of the sentence. So what is this based upon, though? Well, what is the rejoicing? Well, the rejoicing is in the fact that Israel's restoration benefits everyone, because let's not forget the third promise given to Abraham, that through Israel all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Through Israel, all the nations that God has disinherited, the Gentiles that he has pushed away, he is going to bring back together through the seed. We understand that being through Jesus. That the Jewish Messiah, the one who's going to come through them, is going to be the one that unifies the world back to God. So that's a story that is painted here by this song. And I don't know about you, but this seems like a really long song. Could you imagine singing this song? Well, it's long because there's a lot of meat here. There's a lot of strong theology here. Again, this song teaches Israel about who they are, that God specially chose them, and that so long excuse me, so long as they were faithful to him, those blessings would continue. But as soon as they became arrogant, so as soon as they forgot God, as soon as they rejected him and left him behind, then he would punish them. And he would bring the nations against them. But the nations do the same thing. They become arrogant, so God is going to punish them. He's going to wait for the repentance of his people. And in punishing the nations and restoring Israel, everyone is blessed. Everyone must rejoice. So Moses sings this song to Israel, teaches it to them, and it's something that is to be continued on in their lives. And in fact, this is something really much of the prophets, much of the writings of the prophets can find their roots in this song. But not just the song, really Deuteronomy as a whole. So much of what is written in the prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, the minor prophets as well, all of those can find their root here in Deuteronomy, because the prophets are accusing the people of violating the covenants, of showing disloyalty. So if they would have been more familiar with Deuteronomy, if they would have been familiar with this song would not have just been sung, but if this song, as the text said, had been taken to heart, if it would have been followed, if they would recognize that these are not just meaningless words, but that these are your life and they will allow you to live long in the land, if they would have done that, then they would have been blessed in an incredible way. But unfortunately, as we've seen already in the previous chapter, God knew they would rebel. But they are without excuse. They are without excuse because God gave them this song, gave them the song of Moses, gave them this national anthem to remind them of who they are. Beginning of verse 48, we see this final scene as it's described for us, as Yahweh speaks to Moses and says, hey, you're going to go up on Mount Nebo and you're going to die there, but you're going to be able to look out. You're going to look out and to see the promised land. Some say that Moses could even see the Mount of Olives from this place where they were in the mountain range of the Abarim, this place where the transfiguration would take place, which is interesting considering he's one of the individuals that's going to show up there many hundred years later in the transfiguration. But nonetheless, why would God cause this man to go see the place he's not going to be able to go into? And some would say that surveying this place, Moses surveying this place, would symbolically be him laying claim to it for Israel. But again, he's not able to enter himself. He's just laying claim on behalf of Israel. And he's not able to go in because, as after his brother is referenced, he is reminded that both of them broke faith with God among the Israelites whenever they did not consider him as holy in the Israelites' presence, Numbers 20 and 27. So that mistake in Moses' life earlier on is going to, just as God's going to hold the Israel as a whole accountable for their mistakes, so is Moses here being held accountable for his. Now in chapter 33 and 34 that we're going to read tomorrow, we're going to see the final, in some sense, the deathbed blessings of Moses. There's going to be some similarities here between what we see here in 33 to what we see with Jacob in 49 in Genesis 49, except for the fact that Moses we're going to read, is still full of vitality. Like he doesn't seem to be a wobbly old man who can't walk and so. I mean, he's going to climb this mountain and then he's going to be collected to his fathers. So in some senses, this is a deathbed blessing. These are deathbed blessings, but really it's just the end of the road for Moses. And he is going to offer these blessings to the children of Israel. We will read about that in 33 and then read about Moses' death in chapter 34. I appreciate so much you tuning in for this reading on this Tuesday. If you have any questions about this text, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I'll do my best to address those as best I can. And I hope that you'll tune in tomorrow as we read together again in Deuteronomy 33 and 34. Deuteronomy 33 and 34, finishing out this read and preparing ourselves to get into Joshua on Thursday. Again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everyone. Take care and God bless.